Hey, I'm David and this is Adobe XP Things You Need to Know. Today I'm talking about asynchronous code in Photoshop UXP scripting. Let's say that you have some old ExtendScript code that you want to port to UXP, something very simple like duplicating a layer and then renaming it. In ExtendScript you would do something like app.activeDocument and then active layer just to keep it super simple. Then you want to duplicate that, right? And probably store that into a variable. Var dup is equal to this so that you can reference it, dup name, and then assign that to a different string like, I don't know, UXP. Okay, so this is what you would do in ExtendScript. Let's see how this works in UXP code. It's going to be just a little bit different, but this involves the understanding of asynchronous versus synchronous code. So let's get to it. Let me create a new UXP plugin. So let's switch to the Adobe XP Developer tool. I want to create a plugin. Let's call this test. The ID is whatever. Plugin version 1.0.0. Host application Photoshop. Am I repeating this just for you to become more and more familiar with the process? 22.0.0. And again, if you don't remember that, there's a video that you can check out, and the template is the easiest one, the PS starter. I want to put that into the samples, and let me create a folder that I'm going to call test. Okay, so selecting that, plugins being created, I need to do three things. I have to load it, and I have to watch it, and I also want to debug it. Okay, so now the UXP Dev tool can go away. I want to keep this on the top right corner. I need to add this test folder in Atom. Just keep this on the left. The plugin is here. Let me stick it to the side as well. And also I have to create a dummy document in Photoshop for the sake of experimentation with a new layer. That's okay. And I want to add something in it, like just a circle with a nice color. And let's center this. This is a little bit of a trick. If you have to center something, you select all, Command A, and then with the Move tool, you can align it based on the entire document. Okay, so that's it. Let me also clean everything in the index.html. I don't need no style. So this goes away, the body, also everything away. I just need a button. So let's add a Spectrum web component, SP button. And this is going to say run and have an ID of test. So that's, let me save this. Wow, this is something related to the JavaScript file, which I'm going to delete anyway. So at this point, I have to reference that button via ID. So document.get element by ID. The ID was test, I think. So at this point, I have to add an event listener. So add event listener for the click event. And when this clicks, I want to have a callback function that for the time being just console log something just to see if this works. Console.log run. Okay, so let me save this, click run, and check the console. It says run. The error was pre-existing, so let me get rid of that again. Run. Okay, cool. So this is the starting point. Now, let me copy the ExtendScript code as a reference. The index.html we don't need anymore. Let me stick it on the top here as a comment. All right. So we don't have in UXP any app already available in the global space. So we need to get that via require Photoshop. So const, I want app, and this is going to be require Photoshop, and then the app. Okay, so this is one thing. I suppose that I'm going to have an active document in UXP as well, but let's check this out in the console. So app should be available here already. App, is it? No, app is not defined. Let me save this. Let me try again. Yes, now I have it. App dot, does it have anything like an active document? It does. So here, this is the document. You have all the information, also the layers, you see. All right. So the active document, does the active document have a active layer property? Let's check. Active layers, plural. So this is a different way that UXP goes about active layers compared to UXP. In UXP, you had active layer, singular. You now have active layers, plural. And it is an array even if you have just one of it. It makes sense to have an array because you can have more than one layer selected with shift click in the layers palette. But anyways, you can have this active layers, and if you want just the first one, in this case, it's just one, so that's not a big of a deal, you select the one with index 0, right? So this is the layer. Let's check that the name is the right one, so it's layer 1. Okay, and now we can set the name, for instance, of it, name to a different string. UXP is fine. So let's check if this works. It does. It has renamed the layer. And probably that layer also has a duplicate function. So here it is. We're not reading the documentation. We're just experimenting in the console, which is more fun. So duplicate, this duplicates the layer, so everything seems to be okay. So we now have all the elements to write our code, don't we? App is here. Now let me have a constant also for the active document. So let's call this doc is equal to app active document. And I also want to have the active layer. So const lay is equal to doc active layers, plural, and then just the first one. And let me just console log it here to see if everything works. Click run, and here is the layer. Okay, let's do this duplication and renaming business. Let's get rid of the console log. I don't need it anymore. Let's write let dup is equal to lay.duplicate. All right, and now I can rename dup, and dup.name is equal to dup. All right, so let me get rid of that layer here. We don't need it. Let's save, and this goes on the corner. I don't need the documents tree. Also, let me clear the console. Are we ready? 3, 2, 1, run. And something has happened, but not really what we expected, right? So this has been duplicated, but has not been renamed. And you might wonder why. So let's check in the sources, and let's stick a breaking point right here and try again. So run. This has been paused on that breakpoint. We can just go through that, clicking that button. And you see that the layer has been, in fact, duplicated. But this dup is now something called a promise. Should be a layer, shouldn't it? And now if we step over one more time, we see that nothing really happens, not even an error. So this is a little bit puzzling. Let me get rid of the breakpoint. And let me try to explain what is this all about. Now in UXP, as opposed to ExtendScript, there are functions that run in an asynchronous fashion. That is to say that it takes some time to do some operations, such as duplicating a layer because Photoshop has to take care of all the pixels and store them in memory and whatnot. This might take a significant amount of time. So instead of waiting for that process to complete, the JavaScript engine just goes on immediately to the next line. So it's duplicating this and performing that duplication, but the JavaScript engine just switches to the next line, this dup.name, and tries to run it. So it fails because since dup is not really a layer yet, it's not possible to rename it, okay? So the question is now, what is dup? Dup is a promise. And a promise is a proxy for the value that dup is eventually going to be assigned. And only then, when the promise is resolved, dup can be renamed. Let me try to address this synchronous versus asynchronous thing in a more visual way. Think about synchronous code, so extend-script, so this is sync, as a series of functions that happen one after the other. You have the first function that is here, and then the second one that happens only when the first one is completed, that goes right on. And then you have the third one that goes on just when the second one is completed. So it's 1, 2, and 3. They run in a synchronous fashion. Instead, in asynchronous code, so async, what happens is that you have the first function that is here, and this is the first one that starts to run, but immediately, not waiting for it to be completed, the JavaScript engine goes on with the second one. It just takes a few milliseconds here just to run the first one before starting the second one. And then immediately after, you have the third one, which is here. Okay, so you have again a few milliseconds between the second and the third one, and this is the third. Okay, so even if the starting order is 1, 2, 3, the finish line is not necessarily 1, 2, 3. It really depends on how long it takes to perform the first, the second, and the third operation. So for instance, if the first one is really intensive, it can take more time, and then the second one might be shorter, and the third one something, I don't know, in the middle, like that. So the finishing line in this case might be something like 2, 3, 1. Why not? And getting back to our duplicate example, you might think that the duplication is started and it has still to complete, and you are already trying to rename it. So this happens not on the actual layer, but on something that is just a proxy for that layer, hence it fails. Okay, I hope this makes sense. So the next question is how we deal with asynchronous functions. There are at least a couple of different ways. First one is with then functions. So every function that is asynchronous that returns a promise is thenable. So you can write something like then, which is a function, and this then accepts in turn a callback function that I'm going to write with the fat arrow syntax. And the argument of that function is the returned value of the resolved promise. So in other words, you have this duplicate here. And at some point, this duplication happens and then a layer is returned. The proper way to say it is that when the promise is resolved, then you have the returned value. Okay, so that return value, which is a layer, by the way, is passed to this callback here. Okay, so at this point, you can write something lay here, or let's say layer, and then you can rename it, right? So layer.name is equal to dup here, okay? So this line goes inside of the callback function. So let me save this, and let's check that we don't have any pause debugger or something. Also, let me get rid of those layers here, run, and here it goes. So dup is here. You see that it has duplicated the layer and renamed it, right? The problem with thenable function is that you might think that this dup now is a layer. You have been assigning that to this duplication and then function. But the problem is that then returns a promise. So even if you add return layer here, let's try to console.log the dup. So dup here and there. So let me save this and switch back to the console. Now let me try to run. You say that dup is a promise, which by the way is also pending. Even if you try to assign to dup the layer inside the callback, that is not really going to work. So let's say let dup is equal to null for the moment. and then you go with lay duplicate, and instead of returning layer, which is not useful now, you say dup is equal to layer, okay? So let's see if this works. Let's save that and run. You see that dup is still null. So it's kind of hard to work with that if you need to reference the resolve value of a function, unless you keep thenning functions, which is, by the way, possible if you return them. So if you return the layer, you can now then again and do whatever you want in here with that layer. So L, and then, I don't know. If you need to perform some further steps, you can inside the then callback. Another way that, in my opinion, is way simpler is to use async and await. These two keywords are going to transform the code into synchronous code. Okay, let's try them. I want to say let dup is equal to await for lay duplicate. All right, and this await here means let's wait for the duplication to be completed, so for the promise to be resolved, and then assign to dup the result. So if we try this, let's save first, you see that there's an uncaught syntax error. Await is only valid in an async function. So we need to specify, to explicitly tell to the JavaScript engine that the function that contains this await is asynchronous. So we need to add the async keyword to the function. And can you spot the function here? It is this anonymous function here. So in there, you're going to write async. Okay. So let's save again. Let's get rid of that message and run. And you see that now the dup is finally a layer. You have a lot of copies here. So let me get rid of everything and try again. Run, nothing happens. Let me save once more. Run, and you see it here. We still have to rename that. So at this point, I'm pretty sure you can write something like dup.name is equal to UXP. Well, not UXP, dup. Okay. So let's try this, save and run. And in fact, you have dup here. Okay. So this appears to work. Remember that you have to use await only in the context of an async function. Now let me try something a little bit different. Say that you don't want to duplicate the layer just once, but a number of times. So you want to use something like a for loop. So for let I equal not 0, but let's say 1, I less than 5, and I plus plus. Standard for loop. And in here, you want to do this, dup await the duplicate, right? So let's save this, delete a bunch of layers that we don't need, and click run again. There is a breakpoint going on here. I don't want it. Let's play everything. And also let's get rid of that, which is going to be better. Okay, so let's save again, click run, and you have all the copies here. I don't want to have just dup, so let me interpolate this with the backticks. So I want to have dup and then underscore with the index, right? I. Okay, so let's save, get rid of the duplicate, run it again. I don't know why I need to save these a couple of times. Run, and now you have it. So dup1, dup2, dup3, and dup4. So let me rewind that to show you what exactly happens, which is what you expect. So a duplication and the rename step. So I duplicate, rename, duplicate, rename, duplicate, rename, and duplicate, rename. Okay, cool. So let me get rid of that. So let's say that you don't want to have a for loop, but you are a fan of functional JavaScript. You want to use something like map on an array of numbers, which you can do, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can map, and map takes callback that is executed on all those elements. So you have the element here, and then you can just say this, let dup equal to await duplicate, and dup name is equal to this. The only thing different is that instead of I, you have the element, EL. Okay, So let's save a couple of times. I have an error here. Await is only valid in async functions. And again, this is something that I wish I had €1 for all the times that I got that wrong. You have to put async here. Right, so let's save again, and let's get rid of the for loop that we don't need anymore. So I'm going to also clean the console and click run once more, and apparently everything works fine. DUP1, DUP2, 3, and 4. But let me rewind with Command Z the history and see what has in fact happened. So if we play it slowly, we have a duplication and a duplication and a duplication and a duplication, and then a rename, which is not really what we want, do we? We want a duplication and a rename. So dup plus rename a number of times instead of dup and rename. So in this case, it makes really no difference. But it might be that with more complex routines, this kind of behavior conflicts with what you really want to perform, and you got some errors that you're not able to debug because apparently everything works fine. So the caveat here is that map, and I think also for each, all those functions that run on arrays with async and await, probably going to lead to problems. So try to use for loops as much as you can in these cases. Okay, so to recap everything that we have covered so far, you have to be aware that as opposed to ExtendScript, in UXP you have a number of functions that return promises. So either you use then callbacks or you use await and async. And if you ask me what are those functions, well, you can find them in the documentation, in the Photoshop API section. You can pick modules, for instance, and then I don't know what document. Here it is. You have active layers, and you see that it returns a layer here. So this is not a promise. And all those are getters, and getters usually are synchronous. In this case, for instance, the close method returns a promise. Let's check the layers. So get bounds returns bounds, so no promises, but probably in the methods. For instance, nudge, I think, returns a promise. Yes, here. So you're free to check all the methods that you need in all the Photoshop API modules and check whether you need to use async await. You see async here, so whenever you see async, you know that you have to await for stuff. Okay, I think this is it for this time. I hope you have learned something new. If this is the case, please consider supporting this channel and me, which is always really appreciated. I want to thank all the people who already had contributed. There is a donation link in the YouTube description of this video and on my website. I also have Alge and WSM in the Photoshop Marketplace. If you happen to buy them, a positive rating or review are always helpful. Thank you very much and see you in the next one. Bye.